From Nate Diaz's trash talking to Ronda Rousey's bad sportsmanship, here are the most disrespectful moments ever in the UFC. Friendly banter is always welcome, but taunting and laughing at the loser just doesn't sit right with people. Unfortunately, that's exactly what Phil Baroni did. Also known as the New York Badass, Baroni was a memorable figure in the early days of the UFC. He was loved by some and hated by others for his quick wit and even quicker fists. Although Baroni was mostly respectful towards his opponents in the cage, he lost his cool during a fight against Russian kickboxer Amar Soloev at UFC 37. Soloev landed an illegal knee on Baroni, but the guy managed to come back and finish him off with punches. It was actually Soloev's behavior during the fight that clearly got under Baroni's skin. In a disrespectful move, Baroni waved the American flag at Soloev's team while taunting them. He then leaned over the fallen Soloev and let out a hyena-like laugh, which is a big no-no in the fighting world. And although he didn't officially get penalized, the incident will forever be remembered as Baroni's most disrespectful moment. But sometimes, a little bit of disrespect serves some opponents right. Hot take, I know, but I'm not saying you have to fight fire with fire. I'm just saying that sometimes if someone's disrespecting you, a little payback doesn't hurt. I mean, just look at what Randy Couture did. In 2003, there was a big showdown between two UFC titans, Randy Couture and Tito Ortiz. Couture was the older, wiser fighter who was admired for his virtuous character, and Ortiz was the younger and more arrogant fighter. Both fighters were at the top of their game, but the crowd was firmly on Couture's side. During the fight, Couture dominated with his impressive wrestling skills, leaving Ortiz scrambling to catch up. In the fifth and final round, Ortiz tried a risky move, a knee bar, to win the fight, but Couture quickly defended it. Then, in a moment of humiliation for Ortiz, Couture reached down and gave him a playful spank while he was trapped upside down on the mat. The crowd and commentators erupted in laughter, and it was a satisfying moment for those who didn't like Ortiz's attitude. Even though it was disrespectful, it was a bit of payback for Ortiz's past behavior. That said, not all the funny innuendos during a match are tasteful. Sometimes the joke just goes too far. Don't believe me? Just take a look at what Thiago Silva did to Brandon Vera. Things were looking tight during the UFC 125 fight between Silva and Vera. Silva eventually came out on top, dominating Vera in all 3 rounds and even breaking his nose. The lowest moment for Vera came in the 3rd round, when Silva landed some massive punches from behind while Vera was stuck in a crouching position. To make matters worse, Silva then decided to play the bongos on Vera's back, which got the crowd laughing. The disrespect shown was pretty terrible, especially considering that Silva later failed a drug test for anabolic steroids. All in all, it was a pretty rough night for Vera, and even though Silva won and got the last laugh, it was still really disrespectful. I don't understand why some athletes feel like they need to get the last laugh, even after winning. I mean, you already won. Another example of this is Ronda Rousey. At UFC 168, Rousey faced her most bitter rival, Miesha Tate, who had been taunting her and her trainer for months. Rousey dominated Tate and finished the fight with a 3rd-round armbar. After the fight, Tate tried to shake hands with Rousey to end the grudge, but Rousey completely ignored her and celebrated with her corner instead. Yep, that's right. Rousey later explained that she believed Tate was only trying to be a good sportswoman for the cameras and wouldn't have shaken her hand otherwise. While it's understandable that Rousey wanted revenge, it would have been nice to see her be the more gracious athlete and bury the hatchet with a tough opponent. Being a bad winner is just as bad as being a bad loser, if not worse. At least she isn't remembered for her one disrespectful moment, but the same can't be said for everyone. Some athletes develop a negative persona and choose to stick to it. Just look at Jon Jones, known as one of the UFC's most hated villains, and it's not hard to see why Jones has that reputation. He's been caught doping twice, and his behavior outside the cage has tarnished his tremendous fighting skills.
John about cried on the press conference because I had accused him of using steroids, but if I do feel he did try to cheat, yeah.
But his most disrespectful moment inside the cage came during his fight against Daniel Cormier at UFC 182. The two had a heated rivalry, stemming from a pre-fight press conference that turned into a brawl. During the fight, Jones largely dominated, and with seconds to go, he decided to get even more disrespectful. He threw punches at Cormier, who had already been beaten. Then he proceeded to aim a classic pro wrestling taunt at him, a crotch chop, before strutting away to celebrate. Cormier looked looked devastated after the defeat, and Jones later said in an interview that he hoped he was crying somewhere, which was a double down on his disrespect. But can any disrespectful moments of UFC list be complete without Nate Diaz? I don't think so. When it comes to disrespect in the UFC, Diaz has to be one of the most consistently guilty fighters. He's done it all, from trash-talking his opponents to flipping them off before, during, and after fights. And despite all this, he's still managed to become one of the UFC's most popular stars. And that's because of how good he is. It was tough for me to pick just one moment of disrespect from Diaz's long career that's full of it, but I think his actions during his fight with Kurt Pellegrino in April 2008 definitely stand out. Pellegrino was a skilled wrestler and grappler, but Diaz quickly caught him in a triangle choke. Rather than just finishing the fight, Diaz chose to completely disrespect his opponent in the ring. He flipped Pellegrino off with both his hands while he was still trapped in the hold. He then finished the fight and celebrated with a double biceps flex taunt. Honestly, this was a classic Diaz move, showing both incredible talent and complete disregard for his opponent. You can hate him, but you can't deny how good he is. Some athletes seem to take pride in their attitude, and it's not just Diaz. Michael Bisping joins the list too. Jorge Rivera, a journeyman fighter, tried to get under Bisping's skin before their UFC 127 clash by recording videos mocking everything about him. From his fighting style to his family background and British accent, Rivera spared no insult. It worked. Bisping came into the fight fired up. In the first round, Bisping outstruck Rivera before landing an illegal knee to his downed opponent. Bisping deducted a point, but Rivera was never able to recover, and he finished him in the second round and then taunted him, telling him to go home, loser. Bisping also spat at Rivera's cornermen because he felt they were involved in the videos too. This disrespect made Bisping one of the most hated fighters in the UFC, a position he seemed to relish. But sometimes the disrespect can straight up get you out. An example would be Paul Daly. He and Josh Koscheck's UFC 113 fight was billed as a battle between the promotion's two biggest bad boys. Koscheck used his wrestling to dominate Daly for 3 rounds, frustrating the striker's efforts to land a clean shot. As the fight ended and Koscheck walked away in celebration, Daly unleashed a sucker punch that shocked everyone, from the referee to the crowd. It was the biggest display of disrespect in MMA history, and Dana White immediately fired Daly from the promotion. He hasn't been back since. Serves him right. Anyway, that was all for the most disrespectful moments in UFC history.
We should always be ready to fight everybody on our worst day. They're the new king of this motherfucker now, and it's right here, all right? Yeah, Conor McGregor, you're taking everything I work for. I'm gonna fight your ass.